You ever feel like your encounters are getting a little too repetitive or unimaginative? Or that your location descriptions are falling a bit flat or just plain boring? Or even that your magic items are relying too much on cliches and old tropes that you use again and again and again? So I certainly do. And even with a plethora of random tables, decades of experience, dozens of source materials, I see myself getting back to the same old ideas over and over again. So today we're talking about what I think the reason behind that is, and I'll offer you my proposed solution for those kinds of things to elevate your encounters, your GM prep, or your solo player experience by transforming mundane, tired entries into something that's truly memorable. So why do things get repetitive, boring, or cliche? Well, when you're coming up with, let's say, a random encounter, there are potentially four approaches. Well, one, you can rely on your old random tables and you get results like this one with like 1d6 bandits. So it's effective, of course, but tired, generics, the same old stuff. Well, then you would argue you're using bad random tables or you should just look for something else, right? Well, then you get to more imaginative random tables and you get very unique entries like this dude, a frogorilla who loves elderberries. By the way, this art is mine. I'm very proud. Let me stay here just to show it in its full glory. It's pretty cool, right? Now, back to my point. This entry is fantastic. It's new, it's fresh, it's something that you never used before. However, there are two potential problems. One is that it can only get you so far. Once you use the frogorilla that loves elderberries, you can't rely on that entry anymore for anything else, unless it becomes part of your lore, you want it to come back. But what I'm saying is, no matter how unique, how creative the entries on the radar table are, once you get them, they're used and you cannot rely on them anymore. You could, of course, keep collecting random tables, but it gets to a point that when you need to use one of those, you're overwhelmed by your options and you're flipping through potentially hundreds of random tables just to get something that you feel it's the right fit for the right moment with something that you haven't used before. I'm guilty of collecting too many random tables, and I think many of us are. And you end up with analysis paralysis. Which one should I go to? What do I get? What should I roll? The second problem is predefined entries on a random table don't necessarily fit the tone or the scenario you're crafting, you know? So say you need something to pop into a ballroom dance, court, drama, and you roll and you get a frogorilla. That won't fit. Well, no, that I think about that is kind of awesome, really, but you get the point. I'm exaggerating here, but there are matters of biome, of circumstances, of mood, of intention, that then again, you get back to the problem of finding the right random table with those unique, flavorful entries for the specific situation you're in. Now, a third option, one that solo players are very familiar with and that I love very much, is to use oracles with random words, like spark tables that give you prompts, not direct results, that you then interpret and put it into the situation. Now, don't get me wrong. As I said, I love those. They're very flexible. They can help you come up with ideas that fit the place and the circumstance perfectly with most of the times original results. Now, the problem is, again, two. One, some people find this approach a bit overwhelming creatively. Like just looking at two words and coming up with a whole context of what that is and how it fits in your narrative, that can be tiring. I love it, but I understand it can be taxing. The second problem is the very reason why these tables work is also their limitation. And that is our human ability to create patterns and see patterns where there are none. The only way we can make up things from just two words is because our brains are wired to establish connections between things. And especially inside a logic and a narrative of an ongoing game, when you grab those two words, they feel like magic. They fit sometimes perfectly with what you expected and the canon of your setting and the challenges you're facing and everything. And this is magical. But if you noticed, they fit well. That means that the patterns that we use to establish those connections rely on our own experiences and our own repertoire of references and things that we do. So when we establish these connections between words, we usually rely on our own set of tropes. And even though the possibilities of interpretations of these words are potentially limitless, what ends up being the case is that we tend to interpret these words the same way again and again, based on what is comfortable, on the mind shortcuts that we established, that the references that we have, that we read before, the media we consume. And no matter how many words and how many different ways you can interpret, we end up creating the same thing over and over again. For me, for example, if I were crafting an item and I wrote resist and language, my mind would go directly to a spell with an ancient language that is hard to interpret and might get into your mind, and you have to resist its influence. So I know myself, and I know that it's not about those two specific words that made me make this connection, but rather the baggage that I accumulated from my experience playing, my experience reading books or watching movies, and the very strong tropes of, for example, fantasy that turn what could be potentially endless combinations into a set of things that repeat themselves. Now you would say, well, I don't need random tables. I can come up with my own ideas using my brain, which is wonderful, of course. Again, potentially limitless combinations, the power of imagination, right? We like to believe that we're super creative, super innovative, but I think that more often than not, what is happening is the tropes that live in our minds and the tendencies that we have to establish connections between things come up, and that original idea that you have ends up being reliant on old tropes and cliches. Now, if you're still with me, and you agree that sometimes you could use a bit more novelty, if you're a GM that wants to offer your players something that is uniquely strange that will have them talking about it, or if you're a solo player and you want to come up with your own ideas and you see yourself just regurgitating the same old tropes, you might wonder, is there a way, perhaps, that we could reliably create unique circumstances, encounters, items, locations, events, monsters, and circumvent our mind's tendency to go to the patterns and shortcuts that we usually rely on? Well, this is exactly the premise of my newest project, Weird, Whimsy, and Wonder. This book will be a toolkit for GMs and solo players to elevate mundane elements of your session into something that is memorable, that is truly unique, and that perhaps you wouldn't come up on your own. Now, I could offer like 1,000 D100 tables of unique monsters, items, events, locations, and everything. This is awesome. That has been done. I encourage you to go for it as well. I use them. But as I said, it only gets you so far. What I want to do is to empower you to come up with your own strange things in a way that fits the tone you're going for, but it offers you this surprise, the sense of awe that you got the first time you saw a fantastic creature or a location or a glowing sword that now feels just boring. Okay, it's a big promise, I know. There is no better way of explaining it than showing you how it works, okay? So let's go through an example. Let's say you're a solo player and you just finished an arc of your adventure in a city and you're leaving the city behind, traveling into the wilderness, and you feel that you want something different. You want to color your next session with something that is peculiar, new, that sparks your imagination, right? So what's the first thing you do? You choose a flavor: weird, whimsy, or wonder. So weird is the uncanny, the eerie. Whimsy is delightful, lighthearted, charming, and wonder is things that inspire awe, that are majestic and grand. Now, I know that those categorizations are not separate by any means. There's a ton of overlap and potential combinations among these flavors. I recognize this. In fact, in the book, while I present those three flavors, I also present potential combinations like weird and whimsy, giving that flavor that Spirited Away gives you, you know, the Ghibli studio film, or wonder and weird, that is like cosmic horror, Lovecraft kind of deal. But the idea of presenting these as three separate tones is for you to be aware of the flavor that you're going for. What does your story need? What do you want to present to your players? Or how do you want to surprise yourself? I offer a series of tags and checklists that help you when crafting those moments, making sure you're landing the tone that you really wanted. Especially because combining random tables and improvisation to do something strange, it is easy to fall into gonzo, which is perfectly fine, but perhaps that is not what you're going for. So that's the first step. If you're not sure, you can roll a d6 here and choose one randomly, or you can pick one based on what you want for the story right now. So let's say this adventure arc that I finished on the city, it was very dark and very intense. There was a lot of intrigue, backstabbing, was super grim. And now that I left, I'm in need of something a little more lighthearted. So in the story arc, there is this moment of relief, of something that reminds me that there is beauty in the world, that there is something magical to discover, right? So instead of rolling, I'll go ahead and pick Whimsy. That's the flavor I'll be going for. Now, the next thing that you want to do is decide on the subject. That is, what element of the world you will be crafting here. You might have an idea. Oh, I want a monster. I want to fight something and I want it to be weird. That's okay. You already have a subject in mind. But perhaps you don't. Is it an item? Is it a location, event, a phenomenon, a person, an object? If you're not sure, there is a subject table. You can roll on and get something random. Let's say I'm leaving town. I have no idea. So I roll and I get flora. Okay, so I'm going to do something that is plant-based. Excellent. Now, at this moment, it's super open. It can be anything, and this blank canvas can be overwhelming. So I offer you a seeds table. This is a random table, D666, so 216 entries with 3 words in each, so 648 unique words that are evocative for you to craft an idea with. So let's say I rolled, and one of the words that I got was cup. So I start imagining flora and cup. Perhaps it is a flower that is shaped like a cup, or is it a tree whose bloom is like fruits that are cups? That is already quite whimsical. That's fun. Now you might be thinking, well, this is exactly like any other random table or oracle roll. What's the difference here? You're not proposing anything. I know. Stay with me, because things are about to change. Your next roll is a trait. That is, what aspect of this thing that you're creating you're going to change. And this is where things get really interesting. This is a D66 table that is 36 entries of potential aspects of the thing that you're creating that you can change. They can go from very obvious things like size, proportions, material, origin, to more abstract like purpose, connection, duality, and so on. Side note, in the 40 plus games that I've published so far, crafting this trait table with this 36 unique traits was one of the hardest things that I ever done, making sure they landed. And I offered an explanation for all of them and examples for each one of them, and seeing where they would overlap, if I was leaving something out and adjusting and combining. Oh my God, it almost broke me, but I'm very, very proud of the result. I think you're gonna love it. So let's say I roll for a trait and I get agenda or purpose. So a tree, what is the purpose of the tree? What does it want, or what was it made for? Okay, that's interesting. So this is what I'm going to change. Now you decide on a shift. If on the previous table you decided what aspect you're going to change, the shift table tells you how you're going to change it. Those are imperative verbs, things like amplify, diminish, duplicate, revert, things like that. I roll and I get multiply, and I stop and think, well, how do I multiply the purpose of a tree with fruit cups? You see, these odd combinations is what forces you to think out of the box. If I just told you, oh, grab a tree and change something to make it unique, again, you would probably rely on the same patterns that you usually create and the shortcuts and the tropes that you carry on your mind. By randomly choosing something to change and randomly choosing how you change the something, your synapses start making connections that you hadn't made before. Now, at any point, you can go back to the seeds table and roll for something else if you get stuck. So I have a tree with cups that I have to multiply their purpose. I don't know what's going on here, so I'll get another seed. Perhaps it inspires me. Let's say I rolled and one of the words is skull. Okay, perhaps, okay, skulls and cups, that's fun. But that is a problem here. I start to see that I'm leaning towards a tone that is not the tone that I wanted. Remember, I wanted something whimsy. So I stop myself here when I'm starting to think of more grimdark stuff like cups of bones or skulls that speak. It is a little too dark for the tone that I'm going for. So what do? I can go on to tags. Each of the 3 flavors offers you a series of tags and a checklist of questions that can help you ground it back and make sure that you land the tone on what you really want. So I revisit the Whimsy tags, and there is charming there. So, okay, I can repurpose my skull here and do something like this. I go more decorative, playful, and that helps me bring back all the ideas together. So perhaps there is this cups with a blotch of a skull-like shape. What's their purpose? They can actually contain liquid. You can use it as a cup. How do I multiply this purpose? Perhaps it is different for each person that holds. Oh, no, perhaps it changes its personality depending on the liquid that you pour into. So if you pour tea, there's a calming, sage-like, wise voice. If you pour wine, it's more sassy and dramatic. And if you pour a healing potion, perhaps it's a more nurturing and protective voice that speaks to you. That's kind of cool, right? So you see, going back from a random element of flora combined with skulls, with charming aspects, and multiplying the purpose, I arrive at something that I don't think I could possibly get thinking on my own. I'm pretty sure I would have a hard time finding this unique entry on any random table out there. Now, the thing is, the effect of a scene like that is only as good as the description you're able to convey, right? If you're playing a traditional game and you're the GM, you don't need to be a writer or an actor or anything, but conveying those details in a colorful way, even without making funny voices or using big words or anything, is what will make it memorable, make it really land, you know? So in order to do that, of course, you have your tools, your experience and everything, but I also offer a scene framing table that offers you elements of the scene that you can focus on that you wouldn't normally do, or that you perhaps forget in the heat of the moment, or when you're prepping a session. Sometimes we focus on more obvious detail like sights and forget to dive into other senses or details that would pass by, right? So you can roll on the frame table to give you those hints. I choose to roll twice, and then I get ornament or patterns and posture attitude. That's perfect for the situation. So putting it all together, I think like, as I leave the cobbled street behind, the dirt path meanders into soft moss and golden grass. I spot a low tree with branches that curl into shapes like cup handles. Its broad leaves shimmer with silver. See, I'm going for ornaments and patterns, you see? And the fruits that hang from those branches are ornate, filigreed cups decorated with swirling skull-like blotches. I pluck one and I pour into it a pale blue potion that I found earlier. The liquid glows a bit and the cup hums, and the skull blotch opens its eyes in almost a cartoon-like surprise and asks with a velvet voice, "Well now, aren't you a curious one?" You see, I focus on patterns and details and ornaments, and also in the attitude of the cup for this description. Again, those are things that if I would describe the scene by myself, perhaps I would forget, or I would not focus on that. I would focus perhaps just on colors or maybe a sound. But with a combination of the tables, it helps you look it through a different perspective. And you can use this method to craft monsters, NPCs, locations, items, events, and more. I know from my explanation, it might look a bit finicky because I over-explain the steps. But in practice, it goes very smoothly. You can use it as a GM for your prep or improvising at a table. And you can use it as a solo player or on your GMless games. You can grab input from players, combine ideas, and craft something unique. I've been testing this for a while in my home game now, and it's a hit. In fact, I'm using it in combination with my random tables. Perhaps I get a seed of an idea from an oracle, and then I weirdify it with this set of tools here. So, where can you get this? Well, I'm bringing it to BackerKit very soon. And for the first time, I'm partnering with Critical Kit to offer you a physical version as well. So this is my first time doing BackerKit with physical fulfillment. I'm super nervous and I can't do it without your help. So if you want to get on board and get notified when this project launches, sign up using the link in the description. And as a little incentive, if you back on a physical tier in the first 48 hours, you get a free postcard with the art that by yours truly on the front, and on the back, an exclusive random table, the Weirdomator, which is a condensed, streamlined version of this procedure with 12 pre-made formulas that you can weirdify something really quickly just by rolling 2d6. I'm super excited about this one. It's my first time doing art for a game, drawing everything. I'm drawing over the pages too, not all of them, of course, but some spreads will be super colorful with my hand drawing. You get those tight procedures, all the tables that you need to craft those unique moments, a guide on the 3 different flavors to help you land the tone that you really want. The campaign is going live very soon. There will be some cool surprises on the add-ons and potential stretch goals, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to sign up, share it with everyone you can, and there are a lot of potential things here. I'm thinking of an automated version online that with a single click rolls all the tables for you that can be accessed through your mobile phone or your computer. That's pretty cool. But once again, I can't do it without you guys. So I'm counting on your support. I'm counting you're spreading the word around. And I can't wait to see the weird things you come up with using this tool on your own games. Thank you very much. And I see you next time. Check the link in the description.